Welcome to Kung Fu Havoc number 2. This is my comic book review. This is part 3, and it's also the third take that I don't delete this one because of some little trolls that should be at home instead of being over here. Lack of responsibility, piss poor parenting, etc. So, I was gonna say that this is about comic books like Harbinger or Harbinger. I don't know how to exactly say it. I didn't really read a whole lot of them, and I believe Ultra Force belonged to them. I'm going to talk about Dark Horse. And the only Dark Horse comics that I really know well was the Nextmen. Nextmen, Nextmen. And just like the X-Men, there were a group of people who had like supernatural powers, etc., etc. And then I'm going to talk about the Archies. So we're going to start with the Archies, which is what I was starting with before I had to delete this program because some jackass knocked on my door. Who should probably be in a bed asleep because it's 9 something at nighttime. Excuse me. It's 10 o'clock at nighttime on whatever day it is today in May, which that day is May the 25th. All right. The 2 days to the X-Men day is counting down. Anyway, so, as I was saying, I was talking about the Archies, which was Jughead, Veronica, etc., etc., and Archie. You know, they did them, and they did the TMNT. And there's 2 versions of the TMNT. There's the black and white version, which were more the adult version. And there was the kid version, which they did the kid version. The kid version is basically the one that came on TV. 88, 89, like that. Where Splinter was a human who got turned into a rat. In the comic book, the original comic book, Splinter was a rat. It was basically mocking a human who became mutated and accelerated at learning and everything. And he found the turtles. You guys know the story. I prefer the story with the kid version where he was a man that became a rat. Because I always hoped that him and April would get together. Alright, yeah, fantasy. Because along came Casey Jones and just ruined everything. Anyway, so if you are familiar with that, he was a member of the Foot Clan. He was like the leader of the Foot Clan, etc., etc. And if you're watching the Nickelodeon version, then they're about right on point of where I like it to be, except for the fact that April's a teenage girl. And there's Casey Jones. Alright? And Miwa or Karai is Splinter's daughter. Where in the comic book, it wasn't like that at all. But hey, I'm not knocking it because the shit works for this generation of kids and Ninja Turtle fans like me. So we're going to move on now. And this video is going to be short because I got a feeling that it's not going to have the time that I want to put into it. So, let's go to Dark Horse Comics. We're going to not really touch Harbinger because the only thing I'm really sure and I'm not really sure is that I think Ultra Force is a part of them. And Ultra Force is just like the X-Men. Google it. It's a pretty good cartoon. It only lasted 1 season, but it was great. Cyber Force is Image. Image had Cyber Force, Stormwatch, Youngbloods, Wildcats, Spawn, and like 3 other ones that I can't really remember. But the main ones that I really remember was Spawn, Youngbloods, Cyberforce, Stormwatch, and damn it, I just forgot that quickly. But Jim Lee, Rob Liefeld, and Todd McFarlane were the masters of that, plus the other artists that I can't really remember. I'm sorry. You guys know who you are, and I have nothing but respect for you. I'm just really horrible with names, but the only reason why I remember those 3 names is because they were the ones leading the front. Alright? So, now let's move on to Dark Horse Comics. I'm going to give you the quick, short review. Dark Horse Comics, the main comic that I remember reading, they did a lot of things, but the main one I remember reading was Nextmen, because it was the only one that I really brought home. So, Nextmen, I'm still hunting a few issues down, but they were pretty good. You know, it's like the X-Men, they had a danger room, and they kind of lived in 2 different worlds at the same time. That doesn't make sense, just go find a comic, because it would be better for you to read it and figure it out for yourself than to try to have me explain it to you when it was years ago. Alright, now, finally, we're going to get to other Dark Horse realms and comics. So, at one time, Marvel had the rights to RoboCop comic book and the RoboCop cartoon. Well, not too long after that, when they stopped doing like the RoboCop cartoon and Robot comic book, and I don't know what happened to that, but I know that they also had G.I. Joe and they also had Transformers, who belong to someone else now, but I don't know what happened to RoboCop. Well, RoboCop wound up in a comic book called RoboCop vs. Terminator, which was a Dark Horse comic, which they had the rights to do the movie, so they did the movie RoboCop and the Terminator, and they fought each other. I'm still missing how it ends. I have the beginning. I'm missing like the second, but I have the third and the first. So I still need to hunt down the second and the fourth because it's a 4-part miniseries. They seem to do that a lot because they did Batman versus Predator and they did Superman versus Predator, or either was Superman versus Predator and Batman versus somebody else, and one of them did Dracula, but DC had already did Batman versus Dracula, so you know it kind of coincided or whatever. So if you're into like independent comics, you know, Image, I forgot what the hell the other one was, and Harbinger. There's a lot of them out there. There's not just the ones that don't coincide or compete with Marvel and DC, because Marvel and DC will always be the two front-running comics. But there are other comics out there that do graphic novels and everything else as well. And if you happen to stumble into them, they're really good reads. Independent comic will fucking surprise you, you know, because the next Men surprised me. I got to reading it, and I was like, wow. And the one thing about independent comic books, they don't really follow a lot of the censor rules and stuff, because there was like cussing in X Men, there was nudity and sex in X Men, and it was just fucking awesome. And a lot of independent comics, you know, the only reason why you don't know about them is because a lot of people don't really talk about them. And you can basically consider that heavy metal was one of the leading front runners of independent comics. So if you want to really get into independent comics, I suggest you go with heavy metal if you're an adult and you like sexual natured stuff, because heavy metal has some good stuff and great artwork. Artistry in heavy metal was just like off the fucking chain. And the thing with heavy metal, because it was like more of a magazine instead of a comic book, and I'm sure you guys are thinking, what? What the fuck is the difference between a comic book and a magazine? Okay, and a graphic novel. Well, here's the thing. Conan, which is Marvel, had first been books. And when you have books by famous artists like uh, Arthur Conan Doyle, whatever, Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, the motherfucker that wrote Sherlock Holmes, and the guy that like wrote Conan and H.T. Wells, you have back when they first came out, there were no real rights and royalty things, so you could have multiple shit on multiple fronts, and the only person that was getting paid was the people who was putting it out, where the artist who wrote them or whatever was barely getting anything at all. Just how that clusterfuck at Marvel happened. So as of the 90s, when all that shit decided that everybody was going to get their royalties, why you think Stan Lee is in every Marvel movie? Because they owe Stan Lee billions. If Stan Lee was my age right now, he would be on cloud 9 with the money that they owe him. Doesn't mean he'll get it, but he'd be on cloud 9. Because him, Jack Kirby, Mike Ditka, same thing with DC, with Bob Kane and the guys that created Superman as well, and any other comic book creator. Oh, these guys would be billionaires. Their families will never have to work. And these royalty checks have to start coming in soon. So, you know, a lot of these movies, Stan Lee's in them because they can't afford to give him the royalties. But they can write him a check for being in the movies. Alright, so you got that covered. Now, when you're reading these independent comics, like I said, heavy metal, anything Dark Horse will probably blow your fucking mind and be great. I definitely support Dark Horse comics, you know, especially the Next Men. And they had other titles, you know, but Next Men was the one that I specifically liked, you know. So if you can find these Dark Horse titles, man, they're awesome. And you know, this is not me biting for a job at Dark Horse, but I'll gladly take it if you give it to me. But I only really specifically know Next Men and RoboCop versus Terminator, and like Superman versus Alien or Superman versus Predator. I don't remember which one. Between Superman and Batman, both of them fought either the Alien or the Predator. I seen the book. I read at it, but I didn't get to read it because the comic store was closing, and I only had money for the comics that I bought that day, and I kind of seen it on the way out. The comic book fella was nice enough to let me read a little bit of it, and then he's like, if you want to buy it, it'll be here for another week. Where the other week came, the very next day I went back and the shit was gone. He's like, I'm sorry, man, somebody bought that shit this morning. So it happens. You know, so you know, when you have money, the thing I tell people all the time, you might not get a chance to get it again, so you should probably buy it right then and there. Anyway, Dark Horse Comics put out a lot of good comics, you know, and a lot of independent comics. You have to give them a shot. You know, I'm not saying to choose them over Marvel or DC, because you all have your own opinion, and it's your money. At the end of the day, it's your money to just spend it on whatever the fuck you want. But give independent comics a try. You will be surprised. You will be surprised and shocked. Now, back to what I was saying about the difference between a graphic novel, a magazine, and a comic book. All right, most comic books, the standard is like between 20 and 30 pages. Magazines can go anywhere from 20 to 150 some pages. Most heavy metals, the ones that I've had, I haven't had a heavy metal that went over maybe 80 pages. But each one has articles as well as um, drawings and stuff like that. And you like the Conan magazine versus the Conan comic. All right, for the Marvel comics, for Conan comics, they generally didn't go over like 20, 30 pages. If that. But like the big magazines, which are bigger than the comics, like this would be a magazine cover, and a comic book basically would be like a third of that. You know, I can show you better than I can tell you. If I can do this without damaging anything. This would be a magazine. Well, this is a comic book. And this is the size differential between a comic and a magazine. Alright? Far enough back. The magazine's a lot bigger than the comic. Alright? So, if you get like the Conan magazine, I'll be motherfucker. Found my thing. They broke off my bow. Totally off subject. But, with the magazine, it's a little bit more read than the comic book. And with the comic book, you have the option of like every 30 days you get the next issue. With the magazine, you kind of get like 3 or 4 issues in one comic book, which is why it's so thick and why you have such a good read. Where outside of that, you're just chopping at the bit for whatever you can do. And so knowing the differences, it does help a lot. Heavy metal also has comics as well as magazines. The magazines are better for me because they're bigger and they're a little bit more towards my demographic, where the comic book not so much. And depending on where you get the comic also, with heavy metal, most of the time you are going to get carded. If you're not 21 or 18, you're going to get carded. With the Dark Horse in them, only like maybe 1 or 2 comic books that I had to get carded for, which was like the Next Men, where they had the 2 superheroes that were trapped together and they had sex, and she got pregnant by her friend instead of her boyfriend. It's a long story, and it was a pretty good cartoon. Well, comic book, excuse me. And so give these independent comics a try. I'm James Williams Jr. This is Kung Fu Havoc number 2. This has been my comic review number 3, and you have a good day.